The letter from the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I knew before opening it that my life was about to get complicated. My name is Yates Fairmont, and I had been living in this Phoenix, Arizona suburb for exactly 3 years. 3 years of carefully following every ridiculous rule they threw at me. 3 years of biting my tongue while the HOA president, a woman named Barbara Crenshaw, patrolled the neighborhood like she owned every square inch of property within a 5-mile radius. But this letter was different. This letter was about to cross a line I could not let anyone cross. I tore open the envelope standing right there in my driveway, still in my work clothes. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly, making the paper almost too hot to hold. As I read the words, my blood pressure spiked. Dear Mr. Fairmont, effective immediately, your pool privileges have been revoked for violation of community standards outlined in Section 47B of the HOA regulations. You are prohibited from using the swimming pool located on your property until further notice. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $500. Sincerely, Barbara Crenshaw, HOA President. I read it 3 times. Then I laughed. Not a happy laugh, but the kind of laugh that escapes when something is so absurd your brain cannot process it any other way. The pool they were talking about was not some community amenity. It was not shared property. It was the $25,000 saltwater pool I had paid for with my own money, built on my own land behind my own house. I had the permits. I had the approval from the city. I had done everything legally and properly. I stormed back into my house and immediately pulled out every document related to the pool construction. The folder was thick, filled with building permits from the city of Phoenix, architectural plans, receipts, and yes, even the original HOA approval form from 2 years ago when I first proposed the project. Barbara herself had signed off on it, along with 2 other board members. My phone buzzed. It was my neighbor Marcus texting me. Dude, did you get a letter too? They are trying to fine me for my rose bushes being the wrong shade of pink. I wish I was joking. I texted back quickly. Got worse news. They are trying to revoke my pool privileges, the pool I built myself. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, what? That's insane, even for Barbara. He was right. Even for Barbara, this was extreme. But I had learned over the years that Barbara Crenshaw did not operate on logic. She operated on power, and more specifically, on the high she got from wielding that power over her neighbors. I decided to handle this the proper way first. I called the HOA office number listed on the letterhead. A young woman answered, clearly an office assistant who probably dealt with Barbara's nonsense daily. Oakwood Estates HOA, this is Jennifer speaking. Hi Jennifer, this is Yates Fairmont from 847 Saguaro Lane. I received a letter today about pool privileges being revoked, and I need to speak with Barbara Crenshaw immediately. There was a pause. Mr. Fairmont, Mrs. Crenshaw is in a meeting right now. Can I take a message? The message is that I will be at the next board meeting, and I will be bringing my attorney if this is not resolved before then. The pool mentioned in this letter is private property that I built with city permits and HOA approval. This letter is not just wrong, it's potentially illegal. Another pause, longer this time. I will make sure she gets the message, Mr. Fairmont. Thank you, Jennifer. I hung up and immediately started researching real estate attorneys in Phoenix. I was not bluffing about bringing one to the next meeting, but before I spent thousands on legal fees, I wanted to understand exactly what I was dealing with. That evening, I walked over to Marcus's house. He lived 3 doors down in a nearly identical model to mine, except his was painted a shade of beige that Barbara had personally approved. Marcus was grilling burgers in his backyard when I arrived, and his wife Rachel was setting up their patio table. The man of the hour, Marcus called out when he saw me. Rachel, Yates is here. Get him a beer. Rachel, who was 7 months pregnant and already tired of Barbara's constant comments about their yard, waved me over. I already heard about the pool thing. Barbara came by this afternoon. I froze. She came here? What did she say? She said you were being investigated for multiple violations and that neighbors should be aware you might not be following community standards. I told her she was being ridiculous and shut the door in her face. Marcus flipped a burger with more force than necessary. She is losing it, man. Last month it was the Henderson's fence being 3 inches too tall. Before that, she tried to fine the Matsudas for having their trash cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours. Now this pool thing with you. She is on some kind of power trip. Did she say what violations I was being investigated for? I asked, taking the beer Rachel offered. No, she just kept saying you knew what you did and that the board was taking it very seriously. It was all very dramatic and vague. I sat down at their patio table, my mind racing. I built that pool 2 years ago. Everything was approved. I have the paperwork. What could she possibly be claiming now? Rachel sat down across from me, her hand on her belly. You know what I think? I think she is mad because she cannot afford a pool like yours, and she cannot stand that someone in her kingdom has something nicer than what she has. It sounded petty, but Rachel might have been onto something. Barbara lived in one of the older models in the neighborhood, one without the extended backyard space that my lot had. She had made comments before about how ostentatious certain home improvements were, always with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. So what are you going to do? Marcus asked, bringing over a plate of burgers. First, I'm going to document everything. Take photos, gather all my paperwork, and make copies. Then, I'm going to the next HOA meeting with all of it and demanding an explanation. If she does not back down, I am hiring a lawyer. You might want to hire the lawyer now, Rachel said quietly. Barbara does not back down, ever. You remember what happened to the Kowalskis? I did remember. The Kowalskis had fought Barbara over a shed they built that she claimed was not the approved color. The battle went on for 8 months, cost them over $15,000 in legal fees, and they eventually just sold their house and moved. Barbara had thrown a neighborhood barbecue to celebrate their departure. But I was not the Kowalskis. I had documentation, proper permits, and most importantly, I was right. The law was on my side. The next morning, I took a personal day from work. I was a software engineer for a tech company downtown, and I had plenty of time saved up. I spent the entire morning photographing my pool from every angle, making copies of every document, and creating a detailed timeline of the pool's construction and approval process. At 11 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Barbara Crenshaw standing on my porch, wearing a white pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, despite the fact that my porch was completely shaded. Behind her stood 2 other people I recognized as board members, Dale Winters, a retired accountant who always looked uncomfortable during Barbara's rants, and Sharon Mitchell, who served as Barbara's second-in-command and enabler. I opened the door but did not invite them in. Barbara, Dale, Sharon, what can I do for you? Barbara removed her sunglasses with a flourish, as if she was in a movie. Mr. Fairmont, we are here to conduct an official HOA inspection of your property, specifically the pool area. As you were informed yesterday, there are serious concerns about compliance. I was informed my privileges were revoked, I said calmly. I was not informed of any specific violations, and I certainly was not informed that anyone would be conducting an inspection. Don't you need to provide 24 hours notice for that? Dale shifted uncomfortably. Actually, Barbara, he is right about the notice requirement. It's in our bylaws. Barbara shot Dale a look that could have melted steel. This is an emergency inspection, which overrides the standard notice period. What emergency? I asked, crossing my arms. The emergency is that you are operating an unpermitted recreational facility that poses a danger to the community. I actually laughed. Barbara, I have the city permits right here. Would you like to see them? I also have the HOA approval form with your signature on it from 2 years ago. I held up the folder I had prepared. Barbara's face tightened, but she maintained her composure. Those permits are outdated. Recent changes to HOA regulations require new approval for all water features. You failed to obtain updated approval. What changes? I check the HOA updates every month. There has been nothing about water features. Sharon spoke up for the first time, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The changes were passed at the February board meeting. All homeowners were notified. I was not notified, I said firmly, and I attended the February meeting. There was no mention of changes to water feature regulations. Well, you should have been paying better attention, Barbara said, her voice rising slightly. Regardless, you are currently in violation, and until you remedy the situation, your pool usage is suspended. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. Barbara, with all due respect, you cannot suspend my use of my own pool on my own property. That's not how property rights work. If you believe there is a legitimate violation, you can issue a fine and I will contest it, but you cannot prohibit me from using my own property. Watch me, Barbara said, pulling out her phone. She took a photo of me standing in my doorway. I am documenting your refusal to comply with HOA regulations. Every day you use that pool, you will be fined $500. That's my authority as HOA president, and it's outlined in the covenants you signed when you purchased this property. Dale cleared his throat. Barbara, maybe we should table this discussion until the next board meeting. Let everyone cool down and review the documentation. There is nothing to review, Barbara snapped. The violation is clear. Mr. Fairmont, you have been notified. Good day. She turned on her heel and marched back to the golf cart she used to patrol the neighborhood. Sharon followed immediately, but Dale lingered for a moment. Yates, he said quietly, get a lawyer. She is not going to let this go, and I don't have the votes to stop her. Sharon always sides with Barbara, and the other two board members do whatever Barbara tells them to. Why? I asked. Why is she doing this? Dale glanced back at the golf cart where Barbara was waiting impatiently. Between you and me, your pool is nicer than anything she could afford, and last month at the country club, she overheard your girlfriend telling someone that your house was the best property in Oakwood Estates. Barbara has not stopped talking about it since. I did not have a girlfriend, but I had been dating someone casually a few months ago. The idea that Barbara was this petty was almost hard to believe, except that it made perfect sense. Thanks for the heads up, Dale. He nodded and walked back to the golf cart. I watched them drive away, then immediately went inside and started searching for attorneys again. I found one that afternoon. Her name was Patricia Velasquez, and she specialized in real estate law and HOA disputes. Her office was in Scottsdale, and she agreed to meet with me the next day. That night, I used my pool. I was not going to let Barbara's ridiculous letter stop me from enjoying the property I had paid for. I did laps for 45 minutes, half expecting Barbara to show up with a camera or the police. Neither happened. The meeting with Patricia went better than I expected. She was in her early 50s, professional, and immediately understood the situation. So let me make sure I understand, she said, reviewing the documents I had brought. You built this pool 2 years ago with full city permits and HOA approval. No one objected at the time. Now, 2 years later, the HOA president is claiming you need new approval based on regulation changes that you have no record of, and she is trying to prohibit you from using your own pool. That's exactly right. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Mr. Fairmont, this is one of the more clear-cut cases I have seen. HOAs have a lot of power, but they cannot retroactively change rules and then penalize homeowners for not complying with rules that did not exist when the improvement was made. And they certainly cannot prohibit you from using your own property without due process. So what do? First, we send a cease and desist letter to the HOA, informing them that any fines issued are improper and will be contested. Second, we request all documentation of these supposed regulation changes, including meeting minutes and homeowner notifications. Third, we attend the next board meeting and put this on record. If they continue after that, we file a lawsuit. How much is this going to cost me? My retainer is $3,000. If this goes to litigation, it could be more, but honestly, I do not think it will get that far. Once they realize you have legal representation and that their case has no merit, they will usually back down. And if they do not, we can often recover attorney fees in these types of cases if we win. I wrote the check on the spot. $3,000 was a lot of money, but it was worth it to not let Barbara push me around. The cease and desist letter went out the next day via certified mail. I also requested copies of the February meeting minutes and any documentation of regulation changes regarding water features. The HOA had 10 days to respond. In the meantime, I continued using my pool every evening after work. On the 4th day, I received another letter from the HOA. This one informed me that I had accumulated $2,000 in fines for continued pool usage in violation of HOA regulations. Patricia laughed when I showed her. They are actually making this easier for us. Keep a record of every fine they issue. It will all be evidence when we go to court. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Patricia and I planned to attend together. In the week leading up to the meeting, I started hearing from other neighbors who had their own battles with Barbara. The Hendersons told me about their fence dispute. The Matsudas shared their story about the trash can incident. Even old Mrs. Peterson, who had lived in the neighborhood for 15 years, told me about how Barbara had tried to fine her for having a bird feeder that attracted too many birds. "She's been like this for 3 years," Mrs. Peterson said when I visited her, "ever since she became HOA president. Before that, the neighborhood was peaceful. Now everyone is scared to do anything without her approval." "Why doesn't someone run against her?" I asked. Mrs. Peterson shook her head sadly. "People have tried, but Barbara controls the election process, and she has Sharon and the others on the board who count the votes. There were rumors last year that the election was rigged, but no one could prove it." This was worse than I thought. It was not just about my pool anymore. This was about a petty tyrant who had taken control of an entire neighborhood and was making everyone's lives miserable. Tuesday evening arrived, and Patricia and I walked into the community center where HOA meetings were held. The room was packed. Word had spread about my dispute with Barbara, and it seemed like half the neighborhood had shown up to watch. Barbara sat at the head of a long table at the front of the room, flanked by Sharon, Dale, and 2 other board members I recognized but did not know well. When she saw me walk in with Patricia, her face went pale for just a moment before she composed herself. "Good evening, everyone," Barbara said, calling the meeting to order. "We have a full agenda tonight, so let's begin with the treasurer's report." For the next 30 minutes, the board discussed mundane financial matters while everyone in the room waited for the real show to begin. Finally, Barbara cleared her throat and said, "Next on the agenda, we have the matter of violations at 847 Saguaro Lane." I stood up and Patricia stood with me. "Madam President," Patricia said in a clear, professional voice, "my name is Patricia Velasquez, and I am representing Mr. Yates Fairmont in this matter. Before we proceed, I need to request copies of the regulation changes referenced in the violation notice sent to my client, as well as meeting minutes from the February board meeting where these changes were supposedly passed." Barbara's smile looked plastic. "I do not believe we need to provide anything to you. This is an internal HOA matter." "Actually," Patricia continued, not missing a beat, "under Arizona Revised Statutes Title 33, Chapter 16, homeowners have the right to review all HOA documents, including meeting minutes and regulations. My client has formally requested these documents, and you are legally required to provide them within 10 business days. It has now been 12 days, and we have received nothing." Dale spoke up. "Barbara, she is right. We need to provide those documents if they were requested." Barbara shot him another withering look. "Fine. Jennifer will provide copies after the meeting. Now, regarding the violation, Mr. Fairmont built a pool without proper approval." I stood up fully now. "That is not true, and you know it, Barbara. I have the city permits right here, and I have the HOA approval form with your signature on it. You approved this pool 2 years ago." I held up the laminated copy I had made of the approval form. Several people in the audience leaned forward to look. "That approval was based on outdated regulations," Barbara said quickly. "Show me the new regulations," I challenged. "Show everyone here the new regulations you claim I violated." Barbara shuffled through some papers on the table, clearly stalling. Sharon whispered something to her, and Barbara nodded. "The new regulations are still being finalized for publication, but they were voted on by the board in February." Patricia spoke again. "If regulations have not been published and homeowners have not been properly notified, they cannot be enforced. That is basic administrative law. You cannot penalize someone for violating a rule they had no way of knowing existed." The audience murmured in agreement. Barbara was losing control of the room, and I could see panic starting to creep into her eyes. "The pool is a danger to the community," Barbara said, changing tactics. "It is not properly fenced, and children could wander in and drown." "It is fenced according to city code," I replied. "The fence is 6 feet tall, has a self-locking gate, and passed inspection by the Phoenix Building Department. Would you like to see the inspection certificate?" I pulled out another document. I had come prepared for every argument she could possibly make. Dale raised his hand. "Barbara, I move that we rescind the violation notice issued to Mr. Fairmont. He clearly has proper permits and approval, and we have no grounds to fine him or prohibit his pool usage. Second, said one of the other board members whose name I did not know. Barbara's face turned red. We cannot vote on this without proper notice to the full board. Actually, Patricia interjected, under Robert's Rules of Order, which your HOA bylaws state you follow, a motion can be made and voted on during any regular meeting as long as it relates to business already on the agenda. This violation is on the agenda, so the motion is proper. Barbara looked like she wanted to flip the table. Instead, she said through gritted teeth, "Fine. All in favor of rescinding the violation?" Dale raised his hand. So did the board member who had seconded the motion. The third board member hesitated, looking between Barbara and the rest of the room, then slowly raised their hand. "Motion passes," Dale said firmly. "The violation is rescinded." The audience broke into applause. Barbara sat frozen, her hands clenched on the table in front of her. Sharon looked furious, but said nothing. "Furthermore," Patricia said, addressing the full board, "my client has been issued fines totaling $2,000 for violations that have now been determined to be improper. Those fines need to be formally canceled, and any money collected needs to be refunded immediately." "So moved," Dale said quickly, clearly enjoying this. "Second," said another board member. "All in favor?" Dale did not even wait for Barbara to call the vote. 3 hands went up immediately. Barbara and Sharon abstained, but it did not matter. The motion passed. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in a week. Patricia gave me a subtle nod, and we sat back down. The rest of the meeting was tense. Barbara rushed through the remaining agenda items and adjourned as quickly as possible. As people filed out, several neighbors stopped to congratulate me or share their own HOA horror stories. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "That was amazing, man. I've never seen anyone stand up to Barbara like that." "I had help," I said, gesturing to Patricia. Patricia was packing up her briefcase. "This should be the end of it, but keep me updated. If she retaliates in any way, call me immediately." I thanked her and shook her hand. The legal fees had been worth every penny. As I walked to my car, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. I turned to see Barbara approaching, her face still flushed with anger. "This is not over," she hissed. "I will find something wrong with that pool, or your yard, or your house. You think you are so smart bringing a lawyer to my meeting. You just made an enemy, Mr. Fairmont." "I did not make an enemy," I replied calmly. "I defended my property rights. If you have a legitimate concern about any aspect of my property in the future, follow the proper procedures and provide documentation. Until then, leave me alone." I got in my car and drove away, watching in my rearview mirror as Barbara stood in the parking lot staring after me. For about 2 weeks, everything was quiet. I used my pool every evening, and there were no letters, no visits, no golf cart patrols past my house. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, Barbara had learned her lesson. I should have known better. On a Saturday morning, I woke up to find an official-looking notice taped to my front door. It was not from the HOA. It was from the City of Phoenix Building Department, notifying me that a complaint had been filed regarding unpermitted construction at my address, and that an inspector would be conducting a site visit within 5 business days. I knew immediately who had filed the complaint. I called Patricia, even though it was the weekend. "She is harassing you," Patricia said after I explained the situation. "But let the city inspector come. You have all your permits in order, right?" "Every single one." "Then you have nothing to worry about. The inspector will confirm everything is proper, and that will be the end of it. But keep a record of this. If Barbara continues to file false complaints, we can pursue a harassment claim." The inspector came 3 days later, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez who seemed annoyed to be there. "Got a complaint about unpermitted construction," he said, pulling out a tablet. "Pool in the backyard?" "Yes, sir. I have all the permits right here, along with the inspection certificates from when it was built." I handed him the folder I now kept ready at all times. Rodriguez flipped through it, then walked around to my backyard to look at the pool himself. He took a few photos, checked some measurements, and came back to the front. "Everything looks fine," he said. "Permits are in order, construction meets code. I will file a report saying the complaint was unfounded. Do you know who filed it?" "I have a pretty good idea." Rodriguez shook his head. "We have been getting a lot of complaints from this neighborhood lately. All from the same source, all unfounded. It is wasting department resources." Is there anything I can do about that? If it continues, you could file a harassment complaint with the city. We take false reporting seriously, especially if it is happening repeatedly. After Rodriguez left, I called Patricia again and told her what he had said. Make a note of the inspector's visit and what he told you about repeated false complaints, she advised. If we need to build a harassment case, that will be useful evidence. I was starting to feel like I was building a legal case against Barbara, which was not how I wanted to spend my time. But she was not giving me much choice. The next incident came 2 weeks later. I came home from work to find my pool pump had been turned off at the breaker. The pump needed to run continuously to keep the water filtered and treated, and turning it off for an extended period could damage the system and cause the water to become unsafe. I checked the breaker box on the side of my house. Someone had not only turned off the breaker, but had also locked the box shut with a padlock I did not recognize. I had to call a locksmith to cut it off. While I waited for the locksmith, I called the non-emergency police line and asked if an officer could come take a report. This was no longer just HOA harassment. This was criminal mischief, potentially vandalism, and it involved someone accessing equipment on my property without permission. Officer Ramirez arrived about 20 minutes after I called. She was professional and thorough, taking photos of the padlock and listening carefully as I explained the situation. "So you believe someone from your HOA did this?" she asked. "I cannot prove it, but yes. I have been in a dispute with the HOA president, and she has been escalating her attempts to cause problems for me." "Do you have security cameras?" "No, but I am going to install them immediately." "Good idea. For now, I will file a report for criminal mischief. If you can get cameras and this happens again, we will have evidence to pursue charges." The locksmith arrived and cut off the padlock. I turned the breaker back on, and thankfully the pool pump started working again without any damage. That evening, I ordered a complete security camera system online with overnight shipping. By the next afternoon, I had 4 cameras installed, covering every angle of my front yard, backyard, driveway, and side yards. Everything was recording to a cloud service with motion detection alerts sent to my phone. I also called an emergency HOA board meeting. As a homeowner, I had the right to request one if I had serious concerns about safety or harassment. I sent the formal request via email to all 5 board members, documenting the breaker incident and the false city complaint. Dale responded within an hour, supporting my request for a meeting. The other 2 board members who had voted with me before also agreed. Barbara and Sharon had no choice but to schedule it. The meeting was set for the following Thursday evening. This time, I brought not only Patricia, but also copies of the police report and statements from Officer Ramirez. The community center was packed again. Word had spread about the breaker incident, and people were angry. No one wanted to live in a neighborhood where the HOA president was allegedly committing crimes against residents. Barbara looked rattled when she called the meeting to order. For the first time, she did not have her usual confidence and commanding presence. "This emergency meeting was requested by Mr. Fairmont," she said, her voice stiff. "Mr. Fairmont, you have the floor." I stood up, and Patricia stood with me. I had prepared a statement, and I read it carefully. On the evening of May 8th, I came home to find my pool pump had been deliberately turned off and the breaker box locked with a padlock I did not own. This pump needs to run continuously, and tampering with it could have caused thousands of dollars in damage. I called the police, and a report was filed for criminal mischief. I am sharing this with the board because I believe this incident is related to the ongoing harassment I have experienced from HOA leadership regarding my pool. I held up the police report for everyone to see. "Dal." Additionally, I continued, a false complaint was filed with the City of Phoenix Building Department claiming my pool was unpermitted. A city inspector confirmed all permits are in order and told me that multiple false complaints have been filed from this neighborhood, wasting city resources. The room was dead silent. Everyone was looking at Barbara. "Are you accusing me of something, Mr. Fairmont?" Barbara asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I am not accusing anyone specifically," I said carefully. "I'm reporting incidents that have occurred and requesting that the board take action to ensure this harassment stops. If it continues, I will have no choice but to pursue legal action, not just against individuals, but potentially against the HOA as an entity. Patricia spoke up. Additionally, if criminal behavior is occurring under the guise of HOA enforcement, the board has a fiduciary duty to investigate and take appropriate action. Failure to do so could expose the board to liability. Dale cleared his throat. I move that we open an official investigation into these allegations and that we suspend any and all enforcement actions against Mr. Fairmont's property pending the outcome of that investigation. Second, said one of the other board members immediately. Barbara looked like she was going to be sick. This is ridiculous. We cannot just open investigations based on unsubstantiated accusations. There is a police report, Dale pointed out. That is pretty substantiated. All in favor? 3 hands went up. Barbara and Sharon abstained again, but the vote passed. Furthermore, Dale continued, clearly on a roll now, I move that we hire an independent third party to audit HOA actions over the past year, including all violations issued, fines collected, and enforcement activities. We need to make sure everything has been done properly and legally. This motion passed too, with the same 3-2 vote. Barbara abruptly stood up. If this is how the board is going to operate, then I resign as president, effective immediately. She grabbed her papers in her purse and stormed out of the room. Sharon hesitated for a moment, then followed her. The room erupted in conversation. Dale looked stunned, like he had not expected that outcome, but was not entirely upset about it either. Okay, Dale said, raising his hands for quiet. Okay, everyone, this is unexpected, but we need to maintain order. According to our bylaws, if the president resigns, the vice president assumes the role until the next election. That would be Sharon, but she just left. So it falls to the secretary, which is me. People started clapping. Dale looked uncomfortable with the attention, but accepted it. Let's table everything else for tonight, Dale said. I need to review the bylaws and figure out proper procedures. We will reconvene next month for our regular meeting. As people filed out, several neighbors stopped to shake my hand or thank me. Mrs. Peterson had tears in her eyes. You did what none of us could do, she said. You stood up to her. Thank you. I felt good, but also exhausted. This had consumed weeks of my life, cost me thousands in legal fees, and put me through incredible stress. But it was worth it to see Barbara finally face consequences for her behavior. Patricia and I walked to the parking lot together. Great outcome, she said. Barbara resigning is better than anything we could have achieved through litigation. Do you think she actually did the stuff to my breaker? Hard to say without proof, but the cameras you installed will help going forward, and with Dale running things, I think you will have a much more reasonable HOA to deal with. She was right. Over the next few weeks, Dale proved to be a fair and reasonable HOA president. He did not patrol the neighborhood looking for violations. He did not send threatening letters. He focused on actual community concerns like road maintenance and neighborhood safety. The independent audit Patricia had recommended was completed by a local accounting firm. The results were shocking. Barbara had issued over 100 violation notices in the past year, many of them for trivial or non-existent problems. She had collected nearly $50,000 in fines, but the audit could only account for about $30,000 of it in HOA records. $20,000 was missing. Dale called another emergency meeting to present the audit findings. This time, Barbara was not present, but everyone else was. The audit has revealed significant financial discrepancies, Dale announced, looking grim. We have no choice but to refer this matter to the police for investigation. The board has voted to cooperate fully with law enforcement. More conversations erupted. People were angry, shocked, and in some cases not surprised at all. I felt vindicated, but also sad. This was not the outcome I had wanted when I first bought my house in Oakwood Estates. I just wanted to live peacefully, use my pool, and be a good neighbor. Instead, I had gotten caught up in Barbara's corruption and abuse of power. The police investigation moved quickly once the financial records were turned over. Detective Sarah Morrison was assigned to the case, and she was thorough. She interviewed multiple homeowners, reviewed years of HOA records, and traced bank transactions. 3 weeks after the audit was presented, Barbara Crenshaw was arrested for theft and embezzlement. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Local media even picked up the story. running headlines about the HOA president who had stolen from her own neighborhood. Sharon Mitchell was also investigated but was ultimately not charged with any crimes. The investigation found she had been unaware of Barbara's financial misdeeds, though she had certainly enabled Barbara's bullying behavior. Sharon quietly resigned from the board and kept a low profile after that. Barbara's arrest made me feel strange. I had not set out to get anyone arrested. I just wanted to use my pool in peace. But the investigation had uncovered something much bigger than just harassment over my pool. Barbara had been systematically stealing from the neighborhood for years, using fear and intimidation to keep people from questioning her. The HOA hired a lawyer to help recover the stolen funds, and eventually, Barbara agreed to a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by probation. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. With Barbara gone and the finances being straightened out, Oakwood Estates became a much more pleasant place to live. Dale served out the rest of Barbara's term as president and then stepped down, saying he had done his duty but did not want the job long term. A new board was elected, consisting of reasonable people who actually cared about the community rather than power and control. The missing $20,000 was eventually recovered through the restitution order and Barbara's assets being liquidated. The HOA used the money to make genuine improvements to the neighborhood, like fixing cracked sidewalks and upgrading the community center. As for me, I continued to use my pool every evening after work. The cameras I had installed remained up just in case, but I never had another incident. Neighbors who had been afraid to make any improvements to their properties under Barbara's reign started doing projects again. The Hendersons finally built their fence. The Matsudas added a beautiful garden. Mrs. Peterson installed solar panels. One Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after Barbara's arrest, I was floating in my pool when Marcus and Rachel came over with their new baby daughter. Rachel looked tired but happy. "Mind if we visit?" Marcus called over the fence. "Come on over," I said, climbing out and grabbing a towel. They came through the gate, and Rachel settled into one of my patio chairs with the baby. "We wanted to thank you again," Rachel said. "If you had not stood up to Barbara, she would still be terrorizing everyone. We were seriously considering moving, but now we actually want to stay." "I just defended my property," I said, sitting down across from her. "I did not know it would lead to all of this." "That is what makes it even better," Marcus said, cracking open a soda I offered him from the cooler. "You are not trying to be a hero. You just refused to be pushed around. That gave everyone else the courage to speak up too." We sat there for a while, enjoying the Arizona sunshine and the sound of the pool filter running smoothly. No letters from the HOA, no golf cart patrols, no threats or fines, just peaceful suburban life, the way it should be. The whole ordeal had taught me something valuable about standing up for yourself and not backing down when you are right. It had also shown me that bullies often get away with bad behavior not because they are powerful, but because people are afraid to challenge them. Once someone does challenge them, their power evaporates quickly. Dale stopped by later that evening, saying he was doing a neighborhood walk and wanted to check in. He looked more relaxed than I had ever seen him. "Everything good with the pool?" he asked with a smile. "Everything is perfect," I said. "Good. You know, the new board was talking, and we want to thank you formally at the next meeting. If you had not pushed back when you did, the financial problems might have gone undetected for years. Barbara could have stolen a lot more money." "I do not need thanks," I said. "I just want to live here in peace." "Well, you've got it. New board, new policies, new attitude. We are even revising the bylaws to add more oversight and prevent any one person from having too much control. Should have done it years ago." After Dale left, I stood at the edge of my pool, looking at the clear water illuminated by the underwater lights. $25,000 I had invested in this pool, plus another $3,000 in legal fees to defend my right to use it. But it was worth every penny. The pool represented more than just a place to swim. It represented property rights, standing up to injustice and refusing to be bullied. It represented the principle that when you are right and you have the law on your side, you should never back down, no matter how intimidating the opposition seems. I dove into the water and did a few laps, feeling the tension of the past months finally washing away. When I climbed out, I noticed several neighbors were outside, working in their yards or walking dogs. People seemed happier, more relaxed. The neighborhood had its spirit back. Over the next few weeks, I started getting to know my neighbors better. Without the constant fear of Barbara's retaliation, people were friendlier and more open. We organized a neighborhood barbecue at the community center, and over 100 people showed up. It was the first time in years that the community had come together for something positive rather than another tense HOA meeting. At the barbecue, Mrs. Peterson approached me with a plate of her homemade cookies. "I wanted to give you these," she said. "My thank you for everything you did." "Mrs. Peterson, you did not have to do that." "I wanted to. You know, I have lived here for 15 years, and the last 3 under Barbara were the worst. I actually dreaded coming home some days because I was afraid of what letter would be waiting for me. Now I feel like I can actually enjoy my house again." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had focused so much on my own situation that I had not fully appreciated how many people had been suffering under Barbara's regime. "I am glad things are better now," I said sincerely. "They are, and it is because of you." The autumn months passed peacefully. My work picked up with a major project, which was a welcome distraction. I spent my evenings swimming, my weekends relaxing, and my time not worrying about HOA drama. It was glorious. In November, the HOA held elections for the board positions that had been vacated. Dale chose not to run for president, but he agreed to stay on as a regular board member. A woman named Jennifer Caldwell, who worked as a civil engineer and had lived in the neighborhood for 8 years, ran for president unopposed. She won easily and immediately set about making the HOA more transparent and homeowner-friendly. Jennifer's first act as president was to post all HOA financials online, where any homeowner could review them at any time. Her second act was to establish a formal appeals process for any violations, with clear timelines and impartial review. Her third act was to reduce the number of rules that were purely aesthetic and focus the HOA on actual safety and property value concerns. The neighborhood transformed under her leadership. People started taking pride in their homes again, making improvements and upgrades without fear of arbitrary enforcement. Property values actually increased because Oakwood Estates developed a reputation as a well-managed, reasonable community rather than an HOA nightmare. As for Barbara, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had started her prison sentence in late October. Sharon had apparently moved out of the neighborhood entirely, unable to deal with the shame of being associated with Barbara's crimes. I felt no joy in their downfall, but I felt no sympathy either. They had made their choices. One evening in early December, I was swimming under the stars when my phone buzzed with a call from Patricia Velasquez. I climbed out and answered. "Yates, I wanted to let you know that Barbara's restitution payments have started going through. The HOA should be made whole within the next 2 years based on the payment schedule the court ordered." "That's good news." "It is. I also wanted to tell you that your case has become something of a legend in local real estate law circles. I've had 3 other clients come to me in the past month with similar HOA horror stories, and they all mentioned hearing about your situation." "I do not know if that is a good thing or not," Patricia laughed. "It is a good thing. It shows that people are learning they do not have to just accept HOA abuse. They have rights, and those rights can be defended. You set a good example." After we hung up, I sat on my patio for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. 6 months ago, I'd been shocked and angry at a letter telling me I could not use my own pool. Now Barbara was in prison, the HOA was functioning properly, and the neighborhood was thriving. Life had a funny way of working out. The holidays came and went. I hosted a New Year's Eve party at my house, inviting neighbors over for food, drinks, and a pool party despite the cooler winter temperatures. My pool had a heater, and people actually used it, laughing and splashing around at midnight as fireworks went off in the distance. Marcus, now a proud father, raised his glass in a toast. To Yates for having the guts to fight back, and to all of us for taking our neighborhood back. Everyone cheered and clinked glasses. Rachel, holding their sleeping daughter, smiled at me. "Seriously, Yates, this is the best New Year's Eve we have had since moving here." As I looked around at my neighbors, all gathered in my backyard, using the pool that had caused so much trouble, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what community was supposed to be like. People getting along, respecting each other's property and choices, coming together to celebrate rather than tear each other down. The new year brought even more positive changes. Jennifer Caldwell proved to be an excellent HOA president, and the other board members were equally competent and fair. Violation notices became rare and were only issued for legitimate concerns like truly unsafe conditions or clear violations of city code. The days of arbitrary enforcement and power trips were over. In March, the local newspaper ran a follow-up story about Barbara's case, detailing how her theft had been uncovered and how the neighborhood had recovered. The reporter interviewed several residents, including me. I kept my comments brief, emphasizing that I had simply defended my property rights and that the real story was about a community coming together to demand accountability. When the article came out, I received several emails and even a few letters from people in other HOA communities facing similar issues. They wanted advice on how to fight back against abusive HOA boards. I responded to each one, sharing Patricia's contact information and emphasizing the importance of documentation and knowing your legal rights. One letter came from a man in Tucson who was being fined for painting his house a color that the HOA president did not like, even though it was on the approved color list. I spent an hour on the phone with him, walking him through the steps I had taken and encouraging him not to give up. 3 months later, he emailed me to say he had won his case and that the HOA president had resigned. It felt good to help others, to turn my difficult experience into something positive that could benefit people I had never met. By summer, life in Oakwood Estates had settled into a comfortable routine. The pool that had started this whole saga was simply a pool again, not a symbol of resistance or a point of contention. I used it daily, and neighbors occasionally stopped by to swim or chat. It was exactly what I had wanted when I built it 2 years earlier, before Barbara's crusade against me had begun. On a particularly hot July evening, I was floating on a raft in the pool when Dale stopped by with a 6-pack of beer. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Not at all. Grab a raft from the shed." We floated in comfortable silence for a while, the Arizona sun finally setting and providing some relief from the heat. "You know," Dale said eventually, "I should have stood up to Barbara years ago. I knew what she was doing was wrong, but I told myself it was not my problem as long as she was not targeting me. I was a coward." "You voted with me when it mattered," I pointed out. "That took courage." "Only after you did the hard part. You took the risk, spent the money on a lawyer, put yourself out there. I just raised my hand when it was already clear you were right." "Dale, you were in a tough position. Barbara had been in power for years. She had allies on the board. It is easy to judge in hindsight, but at the time, you did not know how it would turn out." He took a sip of his beer. "Maybe, but I learned something from watching you. Sometimes you have to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard, even when it costs you money or time or stress. Because if good people stay silent, bad people win." "That is true," I agreed. "But good people did not stay silent. You voted with me. Other board members voted with me. Neighbors supported me. I could not have done it alone. Still, you started it. You took the first step." We floated in silence for a bit longer, watching the stars come out one by one in the darkening sky. "Whatever happened to Barbara's house?" I asked. "Did she sell it?" "Bank foreclosed," Dale said. "Between the restitution payments and legal fees, she could not afford the mortgage. Some young couple bought it at auction. Nice people. They actually asked me if the HOA was reasonable before they made an offer." "What did you tell them?" "I told them it was the most reasonable HOA in Phoenix now, and I meant it. As summer turned to fall, I marked the 1-year anniversary of receiving that first letter from Barbara revoking my pool privileges. So much had changed in a year. Barbara was in prison. The HOA had been reformed. The neighborhood was thriving. And I was still swimming in my pool every evening, exactly as I had intended when I built it. One evening, as I was finishing my laps, I noticed Jennifer Caldwell walking through the neighborhood with her golden retriever. She waved when she saw me. "Evening, Yates. Water looks nice." "It is. Want to take a dip?" "Can't tonight. Got to get home and make dinner. But I wanted to thank you for coming to the last board meeting. Your input on the new landscaping proposal was really helpful." Happy to help? You know, we could use someone like you on the board. Ever thought about running for a position? I laughed. After everything I went through with Barbara, no thanks. I'm happy just being a homeowner and letting you all handle the administration. Jennifer smiled. Fair enough, but the offer stands if you ever change your mind. After she left, I thought about her offer. A year ago, I would have said absolutely not. But now, seeing how much difference good leadership could make, I wondered if maybe someday I would consider it. Not now, not anytime soon, but someday. If I could help prevent another Barbara from taking control and terrorizing the neighborhood, maybe it would be worth it. But for now, I was content to swim in my pool, live my life, and be a good neighbor. I'd fought my battle and won. That was enough. The holidays came around again, marking more than a year since Barbara's arrest. The neighborhood held a holiday party at the community center, and virtually everyone attended. It was a stark contrast to the tense meetings of the previous year. There was laughter, children playing, neighbors chatting and genuinely enjoying each other's company. Mrs. Peterson found me near the refreshment table. She was wearing a festive sweater and looked happier than I had ever seen her. Yates, dear, I wanted you to know that I am moving. My heart sank. Moving? Why? I thought you loved it here. I do love it here, especially now. But my daughter has been asking me to move closer to her in California, and I have decided to do it. I'm getting older, and I want to be near family. But I wanted to thank you before I go. You saved this neighborhood. You really did. She hugged me tightly, and I hugged her back. I'm going to miss you, Mrs. Peterson. I will miss you too. But I am leaving knowing this is a good place again. That means everything to me. After she walked away, I stood there feeling emotional. Mrs. Peterson had been one of the first people to tell me about Barbara's reign of terror, and now she was leaving on a positive note because the neighborhood had been restored. It felt like a closing of a chapter. As winter turned to spring, I received notification that Barbara had been released from prison early for good behavior. She had served about 14 months of her 18-month sentence. I had mixed feelings about it. Part of me wanted her to serve every single day, but another part of me was just glad she was no longer my problem. According to the neighborhood grapevine, Barbara had moved out of state to live with relatives. She would not be coming back to Oakwood Estates or anywhere near Phoenix. That was fine with me. Life continued peacefully. My pool was now 3 years old and still in perfect condition because I maintained it properly and used it regularly. The irony that Barbara had tried to revoke my privileges to use it was not lost on me every time I dove in. On the 3-year anniversary of receiving Barbara's letter, I decided to throw a pool party to celebrate. I invited the whole neighborhood, and a surprising number of people showed up. We grilled burgers and hot dogs, played music, and spent the afternoon swimming and relaxing. Marcus gave another toast, this one more heartfelt than the last. 3 years ago, our friend Yates got a letter saying he could not use the pool he built with his own money on his own property. Instead of rolling over, he fought back. And in fighting back, he exposed corruption, got rid of a tyrant, and helped transform this neighborhood into an actual community. So here's to Yates, to standing up for what is right, and to never letting bullies win. Everyone cheered and raised their glasses. I felt my face flush with embarrassment, but also with pride. I had not set out to be a neighborhood hero. I had just wanted to swim in my pool. But sometimes doing the right thing for yourself ends up helping everyone around you too. As the sun set that evening and the last guests left, I floated alone in my pool one more time, looking up at the stars. The water was perfect, the equipment was running smoothly, and there were no threatening letters, no HOA harassment, no drama, just peace. I thought about everything that had happened, the stress, the legal fees, the confrontations, the police reports, the investigations, the arrest, and finally, the resolution. It had been exhausting and expensive, but I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Because some things are worth fighting for, and property rights are one of them. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Velasquez. Saw your pool party on Jennifer's social media. Looks like you got your happy ending. Congratulations, I texted back. Could not have done it without you. Thank you for everything. Anytime, but hopefully you will not need me again. Hopefully not. I set my phone down and closed my eyes, floating peacefully in the water. The pool filter hummed quietly in the background, The underwater lights cast a soft glow, and somewhere in the distance I could hear neighbors laughing in their own backyards. This was what it was supposed to be like. This was home. And no HOA was ever going to take that away from me again.